Good morning and welcome. Welcome to our panel discussion on how data insights drive cruise line business. 9 out of 10 innovations are data-driven was a title of a recent article in the Cruise Journal. So data and data insights, this has a huge impact on the day-to-day operations of a cruise line, whether within the cruise line in different business departments or on our cruise line guests. Today we will discuss the impact of data. We will discuss how to leverage the business impact. We will talk about how to inspire users to use this information and what to expect in the future. At the end of the talk, we will have a Q&A, so you will have the option to ask any open questions. And welcome with me the panelists of this panel. I will go introduce you in seat order. We have Kellay Buckelew, Vice President Digital Experience with NCL. Kellay is leading the end-to-end digital guest experience. We have Harvey, who is Director Revenue Science with Holland America Line. John is in charge for optimizing the data-driven revenue processes. We have Francesco Pugliese, who is Corporate Innovation Director with MSC, and Francesco leads strategic digital projects with huge amount of data. You maybe heard about MSC for me. And we have Matt Denesuk, Senior Vice President, Data Analytics and AI with Royal Caribbean. And Matt is leading the data science capabilities with Royal Caribbean. I am your moderator, Stan Schmal. I am with Lufthansa Industry Solutions. We're an IT consulting company. We serve the cruise industry now for 19 years, out from Germany and from our offices here in Miami, Florida. All right? So let's start it off, and let's start with business impact. We talk a lot about the importance of data in the cruise industry. So what is the direct impact of data in the cruise industry, and how does it change the day-to-day business of cruise lines? Matt, maybe you can start us off and give us a general overview, and then we can go in a particular business area to discuss that.
Sure, yeah. So that's a big question. First of all, people mean different things when they say data analytics, and AI, and whether it's advanced BI, reporting, simple kinds of modeling, complex end-to-end systems, and all that. So it's a big question. And I think a cruise company. I'm fairly new to the industry. I've been in the industry 3 years now, but I spent most of my life, trying to apply data and analytics and math to different kind of business problems. And a lot of the business processes in the cruise industry are quite similar to those in other industries. There's pricing, and there's marketing and e-commerce and supply chain and so forth. And the specifics are different and the data is different, but some of those are the same kinds of areas. And all those areas, there's enormous potential to make them work better. And then some of the unique things, what really attracted me to the cruise industry was, in addition to that sort of full spectrum onshore business operation, there's this, these self-contained cities floating on the water, and they're loosely coupled to that onshore business operation. And that makes for some really interesting problems in a good way. And it also is because those floating cities on the water are closed systems. So unlike other kinds of travel vendors and providers who you participate in just one or two dimensions of what they offer, here we've kind of got the whole thing. So there's real opportunities to get a complete 360 view of how to make an experience better for people. Whether it's tracking people density and how they're flowing, and trying to do different kinds of optimizations to avoid having crowds, to make the queue shorter, to give people relevant information at the right point in the right time. These are things that I think are uniquely enabled to happen on a cruise ship, and will have big impact in other industries, such as smart cities. Smart cities is an area that I've worked in the past, and it's really hard to do it because every component of the city has a different stakeholder you have to kind of work with to get it done. This really lets us, I think, also develop great technologies that are going to apply way beyond the cruise industry.
Thank you. You mentioned customer experience, digital experience. From that perspective, do you see data is really driving that force, or is it something what you have already done before the data?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? We always try to think about what are we trying to achieve? What's the outcome? What's the objective that we're after? And we think about all of those processes that Matt just mentioned, right? What's the value chain from getting to one, and how do we turn that into something usable, enjoyable for a guest? What are all the steps of their journey that they go through? What are the jobs they have to be done, the enjoyment they're trying to find each step along the way? And from one step to the next, it's always, okay, what data do we have available, right? So we outline the intended journey, but then we're always checking it with the data to say, are we delivering as expected? Okay, we're missing here. What can we do to improve the experience? What intervention can we provide? And I think the biggest thing for us from the guest experience side is that guests aren't one size fits all, right? That every brand has a unique set of guests. Even within a brand, there are many subsets of types of guests. And so I think that's the biggest use for data, right? For us to identify who are you as an individual coming to our cruise line? What is it that you want to do right now? What is it that you might not know that you want to do that you would find enjoyable? How do we identify those things? How do we then deliver the right information and capability to you when you want it in the least obtrusive way possible, right? We don't want to be annoying and spammy. And maybe it's sending a notification to a nearby crew member to say, hey, Stan's looking for X, can you help him out? Or maybe we deliver it to your mobile device. So yeah, data is a huge part of that, right?
Thanks. Francesco, from the innovation perspective, if you bring in new products, new ideas in cruise line, we hear a lot about automatization. What else do we see as an impact from using data, from integrating data insights into the daily businesses?
Well, I think that first of all, you need to combine data collection, so availability of data, with digital. That's the combination of the two, which brings a lot of information that are now available for us in order to personalize as much as possible the experience for guests. So the reality is that guests are waiting for us to engage in them. If you consider that all the information are now available, they want to be contacted, they want to be engaged. So it's not just a matter of waiting, you need to do it, you need to be proactive, try to understand what their needs are in order to address them with your personalized experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. John, revenue science. Revenue science was always data-driven, right? It was never the case that revenue science, you maybe have used other approaches, other programs, other software, but you always work with data. How has your life changed with new tools, new opportunities, new ways to use this data, and has it changed at all?
I think it has and it hasn't, to be honest. I think there's always new tools and always new technologies that are out there that your data science teams and your business intelligence teams working together can leverage. But data analytics and data science has always been as much of a school of thought as anything else. It's a way of thinking about how you approach a problem, and having more data available, more richness of data available from more varieties of different sources, just allows you to sort of bring more information into that mix and get a more well-rounded view on the decision that you're trying to make, but also have a lot more insight into how that decision could and should change depending on who you're working with, because now ultimately, data science has really been born out of the advent of the digital era. So we've suddenly gone to a place where we're absolutely drowning in reams and reams of data. Well, it's almost more than we know what to do with. So everybody is. So there's just so much opportunity there that we can all look to tap into now, and as we're all living this, not just ourselves in the cruise industry, but not just in travel. People like Amazon, Facebook, or Meta, and all those companies, we're all living in the customer experience industry now. So it's all about getting to the information we need to be able to best serve our guests.
I think if I could just to follow up one point on that, it's true we are all drowning in data right now, right? There's more data than we know what to do with, and I think a mistake people make sometimes is they take an approach where they say, well, let me see how I can get value out of that data. In a sense, you're trying to mine through junk to get, because it's not data that was gathered with the purpose of doing what you want to do. And I think a good insight that helps save a lot of time and get more success going forward is when you instrument to capture the kind of data that you need, which is harder because it's not being captured now. You've got to change some business processes, get people to do things they're not doing. But a little bit of really good data is typically worth a lot more than tons and tons of low quality data. And so that's, I think once, and back to the point, to just one other interesting point, I like that you called it revenue science, right? And that's what you do, because I think what's missing also in trying to apply data and analytics and AI more productively in companies, and let's be honest, the actual impact on enterprise processes of data analytics and AI has been disappointing for the most part, is because we don't take a scientific approach to it generally, right? And revenue science is an older field, pioneered in the airlines, of course, originally, and that's the kind of approach you need to take to actually have big business impact, where you gather the data that you need. You have a very open culture and sharing and documentation and peer review, and that kind of iterative, hypothesis-driven process. That's the kind of thing that leads, in my experience at least, to much more success in having a big impact on business processes.
And maybe just to follow up on this. So how do you do this? How do you integrate this? How do you inspire people in the company to follow you, to go this approach? Because it means also some change, right? That's not the basic, not the standard approach we used to work for the last 10, 20 years, right? So the scientific approach was not really in the corporate world. So how do you inspire users, and this will be the second topic of the discussion, how do you inspire users to go this way, to use data, to trust data, and to trust data insights?
Yeah. Well, I think just to start, the first thing is to involve them from the very beginning. Another pattern, if you will, for failed programs is where you build something and then give it to people to use and then try to help them use it, right? You want to be bringing them along from the very beginning. So you need to actually get in. It's like a normal kind of user experience approach, right? Where you get in, you study how they do their work right now and understand what else they have to do and so on, and work with them to co-develop a solution with them and make sure they understand it. And sometimes that means using techniques that are maybe not as good as you'd like to, but they're more transparent, more understandable. But that having the stakeholders be a part of building the solution and being able to understand it is a real critical approach. And the other one is, I think, one of the things, again, that most data analytics and AI solutions aren't something that out of the gate has a big improvement in performance. It's about putting in place a system where the new data gathered, and as people get used to using it, you have continuous improvement. So again, I would argue a mark of a proper solution is not the initial business impact it has, but the slope of its business impact over time. And that, of course, requires measurement and tracking and all that.
Sure.
If I
Francesco.
can leverage on what Matt is saying, I think it all starts from the top. So you need to have a clear engagement, a clear strategy to be put in place, and then you need to have an organization, which is one of the challenges we are currently having. You find the right profiles to be then embedded into the company. It must be a cultural change. And this is, I think, the most important challenge we are currently facing. So to find the right profiles, whether it's going to be on board or shore side, in order to collect data, crunch data, and then exploit data.
Mm-hmm. From a guest experience, you mentioned it before. How do guests receive this information?
Yeah, I can touch on that. I think it's important first thinking about this from a framework perspective, right? Like, what is our North Star? What do we actually want to achieve? What's that problem to be solved, the opportunity statement? And then from there, thinking about all the things that these gentlemen have mentioned are guiding principles for how do we actually get there? And then empowering our teams with the right tools to say, great, here's this lane, here's what we're trying to achieve, here's the context of how it all fits together, how your piece works, here are the tools to go test your hypotheses, right? And so as we translate that into a guest experience perspective, we're trying to say, well, what are we after? Are we after the guest experience scores being off the charts? Do we want them to provide more referrals to other folks? Are we trying to get them individually to come back, make recommendations to the trade, whatever it is, right? We have to sort of scope out those expectations and then say, all right, you're empowered. Here are the tools. Have at it, right? Conduct your experiments. Let's see how quickly we can get results. What can we learn? How do we translate that learning into the next test, the next thing for our guests?
So you provide the tools and give people the option to use them and apply them in daily business, in daily operations.
Yeah, we almost have to. We have to sort of set the expectation of that's what I want you to do, empower the team, then of course get back out of their way, right? They're close to the data, go through it.
John, you are the internal user of this information, right? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's the analogy I always use with the guys I work with is kind of like driving. It's only really after you've taken your driving test and you passed your driving test, that's when you really learn how to drive, when you're out in the car on your own. And I think a lot of that comes down to, I'll say, everybody's coming and looking at these problems from a very different perspective. And I know I've seen in various projects that I've been involved with, both on the consulting side, but also on the customer side as well. There can be people who who may have been set in their ways for something. They've been in this industry, they've been doing the same job for 20 years. They're really, really good at what they do. And the absolute key to kind of bringing them on board is not to put them on the defensive, if you like, not to sort of take them to a place where I think, oh, this is going to replace my job or it's going to completely change what I do. It's absolutely not at all. They are going to be the end users of whatever solution you're developing, and it's there to help them do their jobs easier. I'll say in some cases it might be that there's some more mundane tasks in their day-to-day job that they have to spend 2 hours going through an Excel spreadsheet or something early in the morning. I was thinking back to a couple of roles certainly I did a few years ago where that was the case. But I'll say highlighting the opportunity. I was like, yeah, we can actually just skip through a lot of that now, and you can actually sort of focus more on the stuff that actually requires more of your expertise and your experience. And it's a real cultural mindset shift from kind of going to an overall data management view to more of an exception management type view. So kind of the 90% of stuff that's behaving generally as it does year on year, you can kind of leave it alone. You might want to do a little bit of adjustments on price or whatever and adjust your forecast steps. But generally, it's kind of okay where it is. It's the 10% where you're really going to add the value. And by introducing these models and tools and stuff like that and developing them, then you can always continue to get the experts focused on that 10% that's really going to drive the additional value for you.
That's interesting. So you mentioned cultural mind change. If you look for a second outside the cruise industry, we know other industries are some industries are more mature in using data, others are less mature in using data. So those industries which are more mature in data, in using data, have they already did cultural mind change? What can we learn from other industries to integrate data insights into daily operations?
I think the two main things that come to mind initially for me are firstly, really close integration of your business intelligence and your data science functions. So the BI guys are looking at explaining what's happened. Now, so this is what's happened previously, and then your data science teams are taking that as a basis to say, okay, based on that, here's what we think is going to happen in the future. You bring those two teams together and get them working on the same projects together. So you got a lot more seamless integration, and a lot more stuff makes sense compared to other reporting and other tools that you're working with and maybe looking to replace. Further on the line. Okay.
Francesco, I know you came from, you spent some time in other industries, so what are your thoughts?
I've been 15 years, I have the privilege of having been working for MSC for 15 years now, so I'm not that young, let's say. I have a couple of previous retail experiences, and I can tell you that even 15 years ago, data was a topic which was already put front. So the tools were not there yet at that time, solutions were not available, but the mentality was already there. So companies were already embedding this culture of data analytics within the company across the whole organization. And I read the report from McKinsey, which stated that basically the average conversion rate of personalized messages is 6 times more compared to massive communication. So which basically means that you really need to know your customers, as we were saying before, in order to promote products that are relevant for them. So that's one of the key things that we can learn from the retail business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, at the risk of oversimplifying the world, I'd say there's 2 kinds of companies in the world, right? There's traditional firms, and then they're sort of born on the web firms, born on data firms. We all know who these are, the firms that grew up when, not in the last 20 years or so, where data was a big part of their business from the very beginning, so the web companies and so forth. And the traditional firms, who built their businesses to run very successfully before data was really a part of normal business operation, grew up in organic ways that are not compatible with the modern data-driven scientific approach. And so I think traditional enterprises, which again are like 95% of enterprises, need to look to those firms to see. And so there's a few things they do. One is, as I mentioned before, they gather the data they need. They don't try to leverage the data they have. Integration is key. There shouldn't be silos of data or capabilities across the company, and there's that mindset that data is a core part of their business, and that data is not something you picked up on the side. It takes a lot of effort. You need specialists, you need experts in it, and you need to build that competency as a core competency within the company.
So what I really love about how other industries are approaching this is taking a systems thinking approach, right? Cruising is inherently complex. There are 27 different industries rolled up into one. Just by nature, all of these silos that creates because things have to happen, right? And so there's a company that I just became familiar with this week, ITV in Britain, right? They're a content producer. And they've really latched onto this sort of transformation of thinking about things from a systems perspective. And so as they're going through their data, they're using some new tools that are available, like computer vision, to watch the content that they create, right? Going through natural language processing to say, what are we actually talking about? From that, they're drawing out attributes. And they gave a really, really good example of, oh, hey, in episode 12 of Downton Abbey, we're going to talk about coffee in a really positive way, right? The content team knew that, the production team knew that. They might not have thought about it, but through the tools that they're using, they can now expose this data to the advertising team, all right? Hey, let's ring up a coffee maker. Let's let them know we're going to speak very positively about coffee in episode 2, charge them a premium to get an ad in that spot, right? And so that's just like a really unique example of how do we use data and the transparency that it provides to bring together all of the complex systems that we have in the cruise industry.
Francesco?
Talking about series, if you think about Netflix, I guess everybody knows House of Cards series. This series has been developed basically on inputs and insights collected from customers. Mm-hmm. So they say, okay, what would be the topics guests would be interested in watching, and then they create this series. It's quite amazing,
So how do we translate it into the cruise industry?
That's a very good question. I think that basically you need to listen to the customer, really put the customer at the center, get insights, feedback, collect feedback anytime. So they go to the buffet, for instance, you collect the feedback on the buffet so that you can adjust the menu for the next cruise. If the beef is cold, for instance, you know it immediately, you can adjust it. Or if you then collect the feedback that they don't like this kind of food, you can, for the next cruises, adjust your menu of a given restaurant, buffet, or whatever. This applies also for the shore excursion, for any services and products you can offer on board. So you really need to collect insights, crunch them, and then adjust the product according to what your guest needs are, because this is what they're expecting.
Would you agree on the statement, the cruise industry must move rather to from reacting to being proactive by providing this information?
Definitely, that's the challenge we have in front of us.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, I think that's so all the things that you were saying to do it, because it's expensive. Each kind of new data you want to capture is expensive, right? If you want to be tracking food waste, for example, and temperature, that's so you've got to really sit down and with the business domain experts, the analytics experts, the data expert, all the different folks, and design a set of things that make sense to do economically. That's going to pay for itself. Because it's going to be expensive, and you need to commit to a long term to this kind of data measurement, that you're going to do to enable it. One example I'd like to give is if you look at an area where I think we saw tremendous data-driven progress very quickly, it's the self-driving cars, right? And because what they didn't do is what we do in traditional enterprise. In traditional enterprises, we pretty much have all this data, and we're asked to create models that make business processes work better with that data. Now, they didn't do that with self-driving cars, right? Self-driving cars, that would be equivalent to them saying, hey, the car's already generating tons of data, there's sensors everywhere, use that data to make the car drive by itself, right? That never would have worked. Instead, they asked the AI scientists and the driving experts, what kind of data would you need to make a car drive? And they make these outlandish requests. They said, we need LiDAR, this 3D kind of radar that spins on top of the car. We need different kinds of advanced radar. We need new kinds of ultrasonic detectors. We need all kinds of really advanced compute. And then we also need you to drive a few billion miles in actual cars and trillions in these simulators. And then maybe we can build the models, to make these cars work. And they did that and it worked. So they instrumented from the ground up to make it work. And that's the way we'll see dramatic progress in any industry really, and especially cruise, and that's where we're focused now, is that from saying what data do you need, gathering that data, and then you're building the models to support it, I think.
Thank you, man. Before we give the audience the option to ask a couple of questions, I would like to close. If we meet here in 2 years, and hopefully C-Trade will now go on in an annual basis, so if we meet here in 2 years, what will be different, and how do we achieve the difference? So what will be in place, what is not in place right now? And I would like to ask you for a short question, so we have still some time for Q&A. Let's start with you.
Yeah, I think, or I hope, I should say, that we will be leveraging more machine intelligence and AI to help us think of the products to deliver and how to deliver them. It will not cut humans out of the equation in any way, shape, or form. And they will look for the combinations of things that we might not have had the mental model to put together ourselves and say, hey, look, this is an option. What do you think about it?
Yeah, okay. John?
I think from my perspective, it's looking at all those things, little things that takes a good guest experience to a great guest experience. So being able to really experience a lot of the elements of the cruise, maybe even before you go on the cruise, when you're on the cruise, you can, living in the world of augmented reality, you'll be able to kind of re-experience or sample some of the shore excursions you can do in ports before you even get there, so that you kind of you know what you're signing up for when you get to the ports and things like that.
Right. I need to write it down, so in 2 years I will remember it. Okay. Francesco?
I think that we need to solve first some big challenges, such as privacy. Well, in Europe, it's a big concern in terms of GDPR, but there are other privacy rules here in the States or elsewhere in the world. This is something we need really to address, so to try to work with in order to be able then to utilize data, because you may have a massive amount of data, but if you're not able, as Matt was saying, to utilize them, it's not really worth it. So that's, I think, one of the challenges we need to solve in order to then be where we should be.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think, the most visible area, obviously, is going to be the guest experience, I think. Just because all the great stuff we're doing internally, we don't share publicly, all the different shifts to business processes and so forth. And I think with guest experience, you're going to see this continuing of it being frictionless and more pleasant and just working better. In part because the innovation needed there is actually, the innovation to move pretty far up, I think, is really just integration, better capture of data and integration of that data. And then the kind of analytics, if you want to call it around that, you can get pretty far with some pretty simple rule-based stuff. So I think just getting that data capture and integration is going to lead to big changes there. And there's already some changes we can see now. I think the COVID pandemic has accelerated some of the touchless and frictionless processes, and that really just pushed them ahead on the roadmap. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, and that'll be very visible. But I think the other things that you won't see as much, but hopefully there'll be this inexorable drift to just better, more efficient business processes.
Inside the cruise line. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. We have about 2 minutes left for questions from the audience. Do you have any questions so far? Oh, yeah. Do I have a mic?
A couple things that you mentioned, which I'm always fascinated with amongst all industries that I've come across, are the siloing with different departments and just all of these systems that just aren't talking to one another. So if you all are an international cruise line, how do you overcome that so that you're just more efficient and that these systems talk to one another?
Yeah, I'll quickly chime in. There's no shortcut to that. That's the data integration problem, the systems integration problem is a big, complex problem. I worked at IBM for many years. That was the bread and butter of IBM. People would pay them billions of dollars to do that. So that's just a process where you've got to gradually migrate and integrate that. And I bet every company up here is in some stage of that process right now.
think what might help is thinking about what are the most important things you're trying to achieve? What is the very thin slice of work that I need to do to bring an integration together? Think about the smallest things that you can continually do to make progress to the larger goal. Don't think about it as a multi-year effort to bring everything together, then get value, right? What's the smallest thing that I can integrate or do right now?
So it's all got to be with an objective in mind, right? So what are we working towards? What do we need to get there? And what's going to be the benefit of that? And I think if all those teams are working towards the same goal, I think you'd be surprised with technology that's coming out new every day. It's making that easier and easier to accomplish. So if you've got teams that have a fixed concrete goal that they're all working towards, I think that's where a lot of those silos start to break down.
All right. Thank you very much. Any further questions?
Yeah, just a quick question on, obviously the success of AI is around data points and certainly with a frictionless guest experience that you talked about. How do we feel about when does a data point, with a guest experience become intrusive? How much data can we collect about a guest? Obviously privacy rules, which were mentioned, but yeah. I guess from a cruise line point of view is how much can we collect?
Well, I think that's something that we've got to be, and we are constantly thinking about, and that's why you can often gather data that you need in a way that is not identifying an individual. Like for example, as I mentioned before, guest flow. Just knowing what the density of guests is in different places and where they're going, you can do in a privacy preserving way, of course. And with the other things, I think you've got to, the key thing is that you let people know and they can opt in and out, and that's kind of the standard in every industry, right? And you don't capture things on people without their knowledge or consent.
Okay.
I was just going to say, don't capture anything that's not actionable, right? If you can't do something with it, just don't collect it, right? And always think about what can I do with this data? What decision can I make? And if you don't know the answer, just don't store it.
But I mean, even if it is actionable, you still might not want to capture it.
It's very true, very true.
It's also true that guests are ready to provide, their data as long as they get value back. So I think the challenge is really to try to capture data that will then enable enhancing their experience.
Great. Thank you very much. We are out of time. I guess there were some more questions. Maybe we have some time besides, so we can start preparing the next panel. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your experience with us, and looking forward to see you in 2 years and rediscuss. Thank you.